bring in now political analyst Sanusha Naidoo, who has been patiently waiting. Sanusha, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure you were listening to what Sipho said, some fascinating information. I was going to ask you if you thought the cabinet reshuffle would come before or after the State of the Nation address, but it sounds from what Sipho is saying is actually possibly going to come in the next couple of days. Do you think he's on the money there?
Good evening to you, Sally, and good evening to the viewers. I mean, I think it really is an interesting dilemma for the president. Does he do it after the State of the Nation? Does he do it before the State of the Nation? I think Sipho makes a very valid point, is that he wants to go into the State of the Nation with a cabinet that he wants to hit the ground running with, and he can't have these dynamics at play where there are certain vacancies that he has to fill as of obligation. So that's one issue. And if he wants to do a cabinet reshuffle light, then that means he's just going to basically fill those vacancies. But you also got the challenge of ministers who have been errant in their portfolios. They haven't delivered. They haven't really been called out in cabinet lokotlas and meetings. They haven't been on the same page. And if you listen to the president's closing remarks to the ANC lokotla, he talks about talking with a cohesive but one voice, having that kind of same messaging that comes out, and you haven't seen that. And of course, you've got to deal with the fact that you've got to play your cards right as well, because at the end of the day, you've got the whole question of the deputy president and where that is going. If the resignation has been delivered, we haven't had confirmation of that yet. We've had the Sunday newspapers, and even last week there was this speculation that the resignation has been given to the president, but it also has to be given to Parliament, because the deputy president's position is one that has to also be notified to the Speaker of the National Assembly. And so I think there's all of these uncertainties and variables that we can't really put into a context that really raises the question for me whether it has to happen after he comes back from the Troika meeting in Namibia, sorry. But it also means that there's going to be an acting president here for the 1.5 days or however many days he's going to be away. And that's going to be interesting as well, and places another dynamic that we have to consider. So whether it happens on Wednesday morning or whether it happens just before State of the Nation, I'm hearing different types of interpretations and speculation, some even suggesting that it may be even after the State of the Nation or after the budget speech.
Very interesting. We are in for an interesting few weeks at least. What did you make of the president saying that the ANC Lekgotla had broadly agreed that a state of disaster is required? We know it has to go through legal hoops. We know it has to be agreed by cabinet as well. But let's face it, if your top structures of the ANC are saying yes, your cabinet is all bar Patricia de Lille, members of the ANC. So it looks like it's almost a done deal, perhaps apart from the legal issues that may arise. Do you think that that's really the best option we could be considering given our crisis?
I mean, I think it's reached that level of an acute endemic crisis that we have to start thinking about whether declaring it a state of disaster actually gives it the impetus and the momentum to actually deal with the crisis. Over the weekend, the minister in the presidency's office released a statement talking about, again, why there's plans afoot in order to deal with the crisis. But the sense one gets from reading that statement is that it's a lot of words, it's a lot of intention, but it's not really how you're going to get this going through. And I think the challenge for the president right now, and in the fact that there's been an acknowledgement, I think again Sipho Manja has made this very important statement in his analysis with you, and that was, there has to be seen that you are doing something. And if you're not seen to be declaring it a state of disaster, then you're just kind of going through this motion of continuously running through this maze that you're not really finding an outlet to. And I think that's a challenge for us. So it looks good on paper. It looks really important that there seems to be some kind of recognition, acknowledgement that things cannot continue the way they are. But as you rightly point out, it's the legal framework. I mean, a state of disaster also needs to look at how you're going to make sure that this legal framework gets going. And I think the challenge I found in terms of recognizing and acknowledging it is that it's one thing to do that, but once you start getting into the bureaucratic issues, the legal issues, the dynamics of what needs to be done, it may actually then have to consider that the ordinary South Africans have to actually experience more pain in load shedding and maybe higher stage stages of load shedding.
One of the things that the president focused on was the problems around prioritizing infrastructure that directly impacts South Africans. Electricity, which we've dealt with, water, road infrastructure. He's spoken about setting up a delivery command center in the ANC to monitor key deliverables, which actually is quite an interesting concept, because he said each ANC branch must then submit a delivery report in each ward, so you'll know how many potholes each ward has, and that has to be overseen within the party. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it's a fantastic idea on paper. I think anything looks good on paper. But remember, the president also had his performance appraisal of his ministers. And we need to look at where that's going as well, because that also ties into why he needs to have a much more effective, efficient, and a much more responsive cabinet. And we need to look at what that performance appraisal and consequence management process actually deals with. So I think once you set up that command center and you centralize, as you said, that service delivery, the challenge is who's going to actually go out there and crack the whip when you don't deliver on how many potholes you have in your ward, how many, what has been the budget expenditure, how have you been spending the budget, underspending. He spoke about that as well, and to deal with those issues. So you need, in a sense, competency. He talked about professionalization, he talked about skills, he talked about having qualified people in positions and trying to create that dynamic. But again, who's going to crack the whip and say to the ANC ward members or within that particular branch structure, you're not delivering, and therefore this is the consequence that you're going to experience, and what is going to be the punitive action?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sanusha Naidoo, a political analyst there, coming to us live from Cape Town. So we've had a look at what the president has had to say about how we might be able to shorten the time frame of load shedding. He believes, and the ANC is behind him, that declaring a state of disaster is the way to go.